Welcome back to the Mentor Moments podcast. My name is Brayton and
And I am Michael Kiener, and we're excited to launch another episode.
Here we are. I'm curious, how are you? How are things?
I'm good. I don't know if we should tell the world when we're recording, but um, being in academia, I'm sort of just finished for the semester, so I'm sort of in between. It's not that I'm teaching in this. I'm not teaching in the summertime, so I'm off for a bit, well, maybe that's the big news, right? It kind of leads into today. I applied for sabbatical and I was granted it, and I'll be looking at generative AI and then specifically sort of how it can support learning in the classroom.
How long? I mean, this is a reminder for me too. How long will your sabbatical last?
So technically, my sabbatical starts in fall, so it's August. So it's one semester, so it's 4 months. But because I don't teach in the summertime, I'm really going to be start working on it now. So I'll be
Um,
on this for about 8 months. 8 months.
from what I understand, does it take a lot to be approved for sabbatical? Like, what does that entail?
Yeah, they're at least at Maryville, you need to be here at least 7 years, tenured or 7 years. Um, this is my 21st year, so I got that times 3. So in one way, it does take a long time, right? Because you got to sort of show commitment to the university, right? Um, and then you have to apply for it, write a proposal. There's criteria. You're interviewed by the sabbatical committee. Maryville gives up to 5 sabbaticals a year. And that's sometimes based on obviously financial funding. So I have the semester off. I'm not teaching. I'm not doing service. I'm just working on this. And this year, Maryville granted 4, which I don't think we've ever granted 4 in a year before. So it's pretty exciting. I'm pretty happy. So it'd be nice to get really some dedicated jumping right in and getting some long term thinking about AI. And it'd be actually fun to see how much AI changes in these 8 months as well.
Yeah, agreed. I now just for the viewers and also I guess for me too. Like, how have you ever taken a sabbatical before?
I have not. So this is new
Okay.
being a director. Not that I couldn't. It's just one of the complications when you do a sabbatical is who's going to do your job while you're not doing your job. So um, with starting our new counseling program, there's less courses that need to be taught right now. So it was just an ideal time to apply, be awarded. I guess I just want to say, put it out in the world, right? That I am still, even though I'm not a techie, right? Even though it's AI, I love thinking about learning. So to me, all my stuff that I'm doing is I'm applying to learning versus doing something just because it's the hot new technology. So
Hot new technology. Hot new. That's us.
that's right.
That's
Hot
mentor moments.
new.
God. Trying to think of it like updates on my end. I mean,
I got a question for you. This is
okay.
a safe one, right? Because sometimes I'm known to not give you safe questions, maybe. Yeah, through your newsletter, your Woot and Wooters, do you have a what's the next burning topic that you
Ooh, yeah, that's a good one. Wow, yeah, a little shameless plug there. Yeah, so my we're recording this right now in May, so June 1st will be the next newsletter, and it will be about why therapists hate documentation. It's gonna be about like I mean, I think a lot of people typically hate documentation. I think I most people hate taking notes, I think. There are probably some outliers out there, but just about every single therapist or counselor that I've ever met has never really ever told me, "Oh, I love to take notes and document and to do that." And other than the fact that it's boring, I kind of took a deeper dive into the neuroscience of it all and just how our brains work and how difficult it is for us to jump from left brain to right brain just because of the nature of our job. So that's going to be out June 1st. So be prepared for that. My last one was about Netflix's adolescence, which was about more about the struggle of masculinity, the struggle about boys, something that I've been super passionate about for the last couple of months. I'd say definitely something that I think is super relevant. So, little shameless plug there if anybody wants to check it out. I've got it. It's on my LinkedIn, and it's
I
also
went out everywhere.
yeah,
No, the other one before that was on haircuts, right? Like,
it was on haircuts or maybe lack thereof. Like I don't know. I've got kind of a. I'd like to get a mullet going on here. Um,
that is coming
it,
back or is back in style, you know.
it is. It is the mullet
Shaving,
mustache.
yeah, shaving on the side too, maybe,
Well, I'm surprised that I mean, I feel like a lot of the wrestlers that you work with probably have
He
mullet.
loves hair, long hair, short hair, all it's shave. Sometimes I just like growing mustaches. So
Mustaches are super in.
yeah,
They're super in.
well,
Uh,
I guess shameless plug. Our we Maryville had two national championship wrestlers, and Ryan Herman, our heavyweight, for most of the season, he was sporting a pretty good looking mustache, but he shaved it before nationals, and it was good luck, I guess, to shave it because obviously he won. He did not give up a takedown in the whole national tournament. So he had an awesome tournament. So
that's impressive. And speaking from somebody that knows very little about wrestling, I like to think that it's probably all about the mustache,
it
the
is.
luck
And
charms.
you got to look as, I don't know, cool or as intimidating as possible. So maybe he was
Which
trying to
what
look younger. Sometimes people grow facial hair to look older. Maybe he was trying to look younger for some reason. I don't.
maybe. I mean, I wish that like luchador masks were allowed. I'm guessing they aren't, but just
From
how
that.
much fun that'd be.
Yeah.
Okay, let's get into the topic of the day. Today we're chatting about AI. We're already talking about it a little bit, but we wanted to take this episode or the next couple episodes to just really dive deep into AI. Dr. Kiener and I have been chatting a lot about it, and um, the first piece that I think is important that we talk about are these two terms, which is, digital natives versus digital immigrants. And so for our listeners or our viewers that don't know what those terms mean, Dr. Kenneth, could you give us an idea of what
Yeah, it sort of applies to, I guess, generational differences where if you are a native, you were born in the world of technology. So maybe given a simple example is, people being born today won't know a phone that's not a computer. Right, so, like, we don't remember a time when we had a shift from a landline to a cordless to a mobile phone to, again, having basically a personal computer in your hand that you actually rarely use as a phone, even though we still call it a phone, right? So digital immigrants then are sort of the people who have lived long enough that have seen these changes. Okay. And the idea is, or the assumption is, if you're a digital native, you just know technology. There's something inherent in you that you're comfortable with technology, technology, where digital immigrants, there's a need a little bit more of a training or education, or there's this shift in thinking because you're learning something new.
so I guess to narrow it down a little bit more, out of the two of us here, what would you say?
Actually,
I don't want to.
no, no, I have a funny story about this. I was thinking about this. So to go behind the curtain here, a little bit of mentor moments. Last week, Brayton came over to the office here, and we were using a different platform to record. I felt very much like grandpa, and he was like, "No, right click here. No, move that bird click there. No, like, here's how you do it." And I feel ironic or funny about that because at home, I am the digital native and my wife's the digital immigrant. So, so again, to give that example. So yes, Brayton is the digital native and I am the digital immigrant. So
Yeah, and I mean, you could probably apply this to so many things. I mean, there are things nowadays that I feel like I'm a digital immigrant on. Um, Having a hard time thinking of an example.
Well, I can give another example. I remember when my grandmother was still alive, and she used to talk about, writing letters to her other grandchildren and whatnot. And so I said, well, I'll teach her how to use my mom's personal computer. And for her to sort of get the idea of using a mouse by not looking at it. So she was trying to look at her hand using the mouse, but also look at the screen to find the cursor. And it just took a while. Right. So again, just this really giant paradigm shift, I guess, if you will.
Yeah, and I mean, and speaking from my experience, I mean, gosh, I can't remember a time where we didn't have a computer. Like I'm going back in all of like my memories, and Wi-Fi was the big thing that I remember when we got. That was a big like, oh, that changed everything. But even prior to that, like I'd say I knew how to use a mouse for a really long time. I can't remember a time wherever I did, and computers were just always there. And so whenever I hear stories or read experiences of when, computers were just kind of entering the scene, it's hard for me to wrap my brain around to like, of course this is going to stick around. But I suppose while that was going in, it was like, well, will this impact our jobs? Will this not impact our jobs? Like how big of a deal is this actually going to be? Um, which I guess pretty much applies to AI then. So how would you say AI fits into those, like, definitions?
Yeah, I think because AI is so new that this term digital natives and digital immigrants sort of doesn't apply yet because generative AI and artificial intelligence has been around a while, but really the last 2 or 3 years when ChatGPT sort of went public and free is sort of this new explosion, right? So maybe people born after 2022 or 2023, right, they'll have a different, experience with generative AI than everybody else, right? So in one way, we are all generative, um not generative. Here, I'm getting generative on the brain. We are all digital immigrants when it comes to um, AI, right? Does that make sense?
It does make sense, and so then I guess my question I'm following it up by, uh, you're saying something that, like, makes sense to me, but I'm wondering if the general population understands that. Like, do people know, "Okay, I'm an immigrant to this. I'm not like a skilled person whenever it comes to generative, like to AI." Do people know that? I suppose.
Well, I mean, I would, and generally they may not, right? I guess if you're familiar, I'm not sure. Maryville has been using this term in other ways because Maryville prides itself in being technology forward. And so we've sort of used this when we've incorporated the iPad into all undergrad curriculum and other sort of learning apps that we sort of, I guess this applies. We assumed that the students would be much more familiar with it than the faculty, but in reality, even though they're used to technology, they still need to be taught how to use the apps. So again, I guess to answer your question, I bet people might not sort of be aware of this term digital natives versus digital immigrants. I guess it's just really it comes down to your comfort level with, in this case, technology. And there's the assumption that if you are younger, you'll have more comfort and experience with it than if you are older. Um,
And I think that you're touching on something that's important, which is like that level of comfort. Like when I use this, do I feel competent when I use it? I don't think that there are very many times nowadays wherever I get in front of a computer and I go, "Ooh, I don't know what to do." Like I know what buttons to press. I know like how to use the mouse. I know the general ideas of the internet and Wi-Fi and those pieces. I will say that granted, there are lots of times where I will use AI and I will have those feelings of like, what do I do?
Yeah, I guess I was as soon as you're saying like turning on your computer, and I guess I'm gonna follow up there before going to your second piece, right? Like we feel this pull, like maybe when we get a brand new computer, right, or a new update, because now we're not familiar again, right? My wife and I got a brand new TV. Our former TV was a smart TV, but I'm just even thinking, okay, I got the new TV, I got to rehook at the passwords, and then like, how, so again, even though we're familiar with it, there's still this learning curve again. Um, but with AI, I also think, right, that because, like, I guess I don't know where our listeners at with their just awareness of large language models. Like, how many of our listeners have, maybe have their own Gemini account or use Claude or Gemini, or Maryville bought a subscription to you.com, which gives you access to a handful of different, again, ChatGPT and other types of large language models. And in some ways, there's similarities, right? That's like if you're used to Googling something, right? You go to the Google homepage and then there's the text box and you start typing. And then with these large language models, the same thing. You go to their homepage or open up the app, and then there's sort of this text box that you start communicating with. Um, and again, there's some similarity there, but there's also more, right? Would you sort of agree with that, Brayton?
Yeah, I mean, to go down that rabbit hole of like, okay, so if we're all immigrants to this AI, to AI, then that means that we're bound for misunderstandings. We're bound to fully misunderstand what exactly it is that we're working with. And there's a lot of things you could blame for that. I don't know if it's the advertisement. I don't know if it's the marketing. I mean, and we've talked about this before. It's not very, it doesn't help when you say, oh, it can do anything and everything. Okay, but that doesn't really tell us what it does or how to use it. And so you touch on that whole idea of Google, right? So, and you and I had that conversation about how many people, or me included, are now beginning to use ChatGPT just as Google, as like a point from like from point A to point B. Like, are we using it in the correct way that it's sort of quote unquote meant to be used? And even that is up for debate of like how, like, you can use it however you want to. Okay, that doesn't there's no instruction manual. What do I do with this?
Well, I guess from a like a researcher perspective, I think we're all in this open-ended, grounded theory, bottom up way. Like we're all figuring out how we want to use it and what it can do for us. Like you sort of alluded to that, and I would agree. I'm the same way. Many times where I'm working in my office now, I have it open up next to me just like I would have the internet sort of open. And again, sometimes I use the internet to like search something, or sometimes I sort of ask a question to, again, you.com and sort of see what the answer is. And in most cases, I'm probably using both things and other things as well to help me do my work, like still using traditional research articles and whatnot to sort of play, investigate. I guess that was the word curiosity, right? We still need in individual experimentation, right? That we need to really play with AI to see what it can and can't do in the outputs and if we find it useful.
Which is really difficult because I mean, I appreciate I appreciate that you're using the word need. Like, we need to have time to play around with it, and I also understand that a lot of people don't really feel like they need to do that. It can be a want, but it's not necessarily something that people think like, okay, I need time to play around with this. Google being used as like getting from point A to point B. Okay, this is my problem. I'm looking for a solution. Google, help me do that. But Chat GPT or AI being more about the process than I suppose the destination. And that seems to be something that very much gets missed because a lot of us use it like Google. It looks like Google. It's got a chat box like Google. I type in it like Google. So I think for a lot of people, a lot of consumers are like, why would I use this brand new thing if I could just go to Google, the one thing that I've been using for 10, 20 years?
Well, and again, I don't know if I have an answer to that, but obviously, and maybe our listeners would know this already. Like Google has its, I don't know, is Google Copilot, right? Like all these search engines have their artificial intelligence built in as well, or that's the first output now that you get is what was sort of generated from their large language model. And obviously, I'm not a economist, but like Google doesn't want to lose people coming to it, right? So they're gonna try to do things to kind of keep you there, right? And so they're integrating their models.
Hmm. Yeah, and just speaking anecdotally, and just speaking from my own experience, like I don't use that, and that's something that you and I chatted about earlier was, like, I whenever I Google something and that little, like, AI thing pops up, I skip it. I skip it immediately, and I think for some reason it's because it's, like, not accurate, or I'll figure out, I'm like, "Okay, I could just I could get this information much easier and quicker if I just click on the very first link." I don't know if that's an experience that you've had, but that's an experience that I've heard from a lot of people whenever it comes to just, like, how Google has been trying to implement AI.
Yeah, I mean, again, I know we chatted about this. It's like I purposely avoid the sponsored posts, right? Because no, I'm not gonna you no, I wanna go farther down. Um So yeah, sometimes I do read whatever that first AI generated piece is. What I again, and maybe I'm getting a little too advanced. What I like about going right to again U.com, Gemini, ChatGPT is when you Google something, you get 100 different things to click on, and then it takes extra sort of energy to figure out which one is best for you and to go versus a large language model does a summary and just gives you one thing to look at, right? So in my mind, it helps sort of reduce the cognitive load when trying to figure out what is good information or not. Yes, you still have to evaluate it because there's are hallucinations, but in my mind, it was just a little easier to focus. And if it's not what you want, ask a follow-up question versus going down to the next link and then starting over. Is this what I want or not what I want? Okay, no, then go to the next one. So to me, it's a
Yeah,
bit more efficient, I guess.
it's that analogy that I've heard that Google is the Walmart. And like, it's gonna give you a thousand different things that you want. Okay, you want ketchup? Here's like 4 different, 5 different, 6 different types of ketchup that you might want. And that ChatGPT or typical AI models are like the Trader Joe's, where we've got one version of ketchup, but you're gonna trust us that this is the right ketchup that you want.
It's
So
fun, right? It's the fancy mustard.
it's the fancy mustard, yeah, exactly. We're gonna give you one choice, but you trust us so much that you're gonna want our only choice that we're gonna give you. So,
I think that's a pretty good way of thinking about it.
yeah. So I guess to wrap it up, that first section that, like, we're kinda chatting about, digital natives and AI. I guess my first question is, would you say the general public, or I suppose maybe from your standpoint, educators, especially in higher ed, are we making assumptions that our students are automatically natives to AI?
I would say 100%. And even just in my small little pilot of asking students about it, they they're still learning how to use it too. And still, is it okay to use it? Is it plagiarism? Is it illegal? Is it not original work? And even if they say, "Okay, yes, I can use it," do they know how to write a good prompt or how to ask follow-up questions to really get a response that's helpful to them? So I would agree. Yeah, we're assuming they're immigrants as well, and we are assuming that they're natives.
And so then I guess the follow-up question to that would be, why is that problematic? Why is that something that we should
Yeah,
talk
again,
about?
we're assuming it's sort of like we work with a child, um, maybe working with a toddler, and they're extremely tall or verbal for being a year and a half old, whatever that is, and now we're assuming they are at a different developmental level. Like, so when we're working with students or somebody, we're assuming they have more knowledge than they do. So we're creating some ambiguity, right? That there's this,
Yeah,
assuming they have knowledge that they don't have.
yeah, and those assumptions can pose risks. There are ways that we're finding out. I mean, wow. I mean, there are ways that we can use GBT incorrectly, is what we're understanding. There are ways that it can hallucinate. There are ways that our own prompts can prompt it to hallucinate. So yeah, there. I mean, if we're improperly training per se our students, then we're setting them up for failure.
Stay tuned for part 2 of this special AI episode of Mentor Moments.